Good afternoon. We are going to go ahead and get started now. I'm Christina Graham, Product Marketing Manager of PhD Science. Joining me today, I have Monica Chen, Associate Marketing Manager at Great Minds. Hopefully you've had time to download this handout for today's session. Monica and I will be here monitoring the questions area during today's webinar on ELA and science. Take just a minute to locate that questions area and chat us a hello so we know that you found it, because we're going to utilize that for both questions and comments during today's session, as we do hope to have this be a participatory session. But now I'm happy to hand things over to Sally, leading us through the presentation today.
Okay, thanks, Christina. I'm happy to have you guys here. I know it's that lull in the day, a little bit after lunch. We're looking forward to the end of the day, and it's Friday Eve. So I get how you're feeling, but I'm hoping you can get some good takeaways, maybe one or two from today's session, and I will count it as a success. So let's get started. If you've tuned in with us today, you know that we are talking about cross-curricular connections in science, specifically English language arts. So the title of our session today is How Do You Reinforce English Language Arts, or ELA, Skills in Science? So science can support ELA skills like reading and writing, but we want to know, why is science usually taught in isolation of other subjects? So let's just start with a little information from the NGSS. So the NGSS's Synergy of Science and English Language Arts report found that teachers who were told by administrators that math and ELA were priorities were reluctant to address science. However, if administrators allow them to integrate literacy with science, teachers can actually address both subjects more meaningfully. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means and dive a little deeper. We're going to look at parts of the PhD Science curriculum and see how PhD Science uses literacy to support science content knowledge, as we explore two different modules today: environments around Mount Everest, and then life around a mangrove tree, which are two pretty exciting modules to us here at PhD Science. So Christina gave you the link to that participant handout. I want you to take a moment just to think about your answer to this question, and that is, how are you currently integrating ELA in your science instruction? And if you're not a teacher, just think hypothetically. I know we all deal with teachers on a regular basis, so think about, how would you integrate ELA in your hypothetical science classroom? Take a moment just to think and jot it down in your first-minute reflection section of your participant handout. And then I'll take some responses in the chat. Okay, if you have done some reflecting and you would like to share with us, I invite you to type your thinking into that questions area. I'll call it a chat for today. Type your reflection into the chat, and I would love to hear from you guys.
All right, I'm keeping an eye out for any responses. All right, we've got one. Students read and write about science knowledge building topics. So reading and writing. I love how they said knowledge building as well.
Yes, that's some PhD Science language right there. Reading and writing, obviously a really big part of any subject area, especially science. Great.
We've got using picture books with nonfiction books, so a little bit of paired in there to integrate science. Love it.
Great. And if you are familiar with PhD Science at all, you know that we use core text, and we're going to get into that a little bit later as well. Okay, anything else, Christina, before we move on?
Lots of reading, especially picture books related to science. Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you guys for engaging in that with me. And let's keep going. So before we learn how literacy is integrated into the curriculum, let's first talk about the benefits from integrating science and ELA instruction. So what are the benefits? First, reading and writing make up a large part of what scientists and engineers do. We know that. So literacy is essential to good scientific practice. Scientific practices in the classroom require a lot of discussion. That's your speaking and listening skills, critical reading, and thoughtful writing and drawing. And some of you said that in our reflection question. So great job hitting the nail on the head. Also, engaging in science and literacy integration contributes to the English language development of English language learners. And I know when we hear English language learners, we think about those students who are learning English as a second language, those ESL students. But I want to shift your thinking. ELL can mean any of our younger students, K through 2, who are just learning new terms, new definitions, how to compose sentences, really wrapping their head around the English language in general. So not only are we supporting those ESL kids by integrating literacy, but our English language learners, which can be kids of all ages, primarily that K through 2 grade band. So we have science, using literacy and science is supporting those ELL students. Also, science topics, here we go, increases students' enthusiasm for speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So if students are learning about something they're engaged in or a phenomenon, they're more enthused and encouraged to articulate their thinking in reading, writing, speaking, etc. And then last but not least, the integration of both content area leads to enhanced, higher levels of student engagement. So those are some benefits. Now let's look at what ELA and science integration look like in our PhD science curriculum. First, we're going to dive into one of our K2 modules to get a sense of how it's done in the lower grade levels. So in level 2, module 2, students are studying biomes. Second grade students explore different environments on and below Mount Everest and work to answer the essential question, which is there for you on the screen. Why do so many kinds of plants and animals live below Mount Everest, but so few live on it? So that's going to be their anchor phenomenon, Mount Everest. And their essential question is, why do so many plants and animals live below and in the surrounding areas, but then when you get to the tippy top of the mountain, you see a lot less life? So I want you to think about how a second grade student might respond to this question, not knowing anything about Mount Everest or biomes so far. Think about how a second grader might respond to this question you see here on the screen, and then type your answers into the chat. And you can word your responses like a second grader too. We love that here. Thinking like a student using your second grade hat.
Oh wow, we've already got a response. Maybe there is more water at the bottom.
Yep, definitely something a second grader might say.
Oh, they might think it's too cold.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, someone also agrees with that. It's warmer. Okay.
Great. Yeah, especially looking at these pictures. Looks pretty cold at the top there. Maybe animals can't climb that high. These are all things that our second graders, or even us as adults, might think. So let's take a look at lessons 1 through 3 to see how literacy is integrated in this second grade module. So each module in the K2 grade band introduces information using the knowledge deck. And what you see here on the screen is the knowledge deck teacher poster and then the knowledge deck student card. So the knowledge deck posters and cards, there we go, engage K2 students with accessible knowledge building texts that are worthy of study. And these originated because finding content-rich text that is accessible to our young learners is often hard to find, especially when we're honing in on a specific phenomenon. So these were created to kind of fill in those gaps for students as a supplementary resource. The posters and cards feature image types, including photographs, illustrations, fine art, diagrams, visual displays of data, and historical primary and secondary sources. The non-consumable laminated teacher poster here on the left contains informational paragraphs in student-friendly language. So we're not expecting students to read the text on the poster. That's for the teacher to read while students observe the image on the front. But students do get the student card to collect on a ring to watch their knowledge deck grow as their knowledge of different phenomena grow along with them. And the text here is student-friendly. Not saying that a second grader would be able to read this without some support, but it's written in shorter, more student-friendly language. So a teacher or a brother or a sister or a mom can read this to their students when they bring it home with them on their little knowledge deck ring. So super exciting for our lower grade students. So as second grade students study biomes, they use the knowledge deck poster and cards to learn about the historic journey of Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary, which are the first people to reach the summit of Mount Everest. So they're getting some real information, not a simulated phenomenon, but some real concrete context to begin their journey studying Mount Everest. Not only are students exposed to various texts, students also have many opportunities to draw, write, and label in their science logbook. And their science logbook allows students to act as scientists, just as a scientist would record their notes out in the field, so do our students in their science logbook. They record observations, predictions, data analysis, explanations, and claims. And in this level 2 module specifically, students are beginning their exploration of Mount Everest by comparing various mountain environments and recording patterns pertaining to life on and below Mount Everest. So I'll give you a second just to view these pages and see what students would be doing. A lot more focused and centered on drawing and labeling in the younger grade levels. You might also see some multiple choice questions with simple text. As the module progresses, the class explores various core texts, and this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier. So core texts present relatable content and inspire student learning through compelling stories. They can be as simple as, like we said, a picture book with maybe one word on each page, or as complex as some of the texts we're going to get to in 5th grade, and you guys will see that in just a minute. So this text, World of Wonder, Mountains, by Charlotte Gillian and Chris Madden, contains information about Mount Everest and other mountains around the world. As teachers read the text aloud, they provide synonyms and definitions for unfamiliar words like minuscule, battering, desolate, camouflage, prey, habitat, and detect. Students follow along and interact with the text by using nonverbal signals. And after reading, students discuss the main ideas of the text. So that's just one activity students can do when listening to a text using nonverbal signals. Other activities include teachers reading without showing the pictures and turning it more into a listening activity. There's many different ways teachers can approach presenting these texts to students. First reads, second reads, third reads, and that's more evident in that 3 through 5 grade band. In addition to reading and writing, as we've seen so far, the teacher edition highlights other ways to incorporate ELA during daily instruction. So as you can see, this just-in-time note, which appears in the margin of your teacher edition, gives an opportunity for a content area connection to ELA. So these sidebar notes signal opportunities for various content area connections. This one just so happens to be for strengthening speaking and listening skills through collaborative conversations. So there's constantly teacher notes popping up to make those little connections, or even suggestions to, hey, maybe reread this book during your ELA time and choose a different activity or dissect it further. So lots of crossover there. So we know that in level 2, students are studying basic plant and animal needs within studying biomes. But this knowledge lays the foundation for a more sophisticated understanding of organisms and ecosystems, because in level 5, students are developing a deeper understanding of the requirements for plant and animal growth as they study ecosystems. So you can see there's some vertical alignment here. Students are studying the same concepts. There's a lot of crossover, but in 5th grade, obviously, they're studying it in a more sophisticated way than in 2nd grade. But it's important to lay that foundation early so students can really hit those skills in 5th grade. So what does science and ELA integration look like in the 3 through 5 grade band? Well, let's take a look. In level 5, module 2, students are studying ecosystems. And as I mentioned earlier, they're using that anchor phenomenon, life around a mangrove tree. So students are exploring the life around a mangrove tree and working to answer the essential question, how can trees support so much life? Again, I'm going to ask you to think about how a 5th grade student might answer this question. So put on your 5th grade hats, think as a 5th grader, and respond in the chat. How might you respond to the essential question, how can trees support so much life?
By having lots of roots.
Roots. I'm wondering what the roots might do for life.
I think others are on the same page of roots, probably having something to do with it.
Okay, and that might be from that picture on the far right, roots in the water. Maybe it could provide food or shelter for fish. Maybe I see is this a rabbit right here? Maybe rabbits like to dig holes under the tree. Maybe squirrels and birds live in the tree. Lots to explore here, lots to unpack. So let's look at lessons 6 through 7, where students are learning about the interaction of plants and air in ecosystems. So keep that in mind. Just like in every K2 module, each 3-5 module includes one or more core texts that inspire student learning through compelling stories. In this module, students learn about how plants interact with air by reading portions of this text, The Mangrove Tree, Planting Trees to Feed Families. So students read the text, all the while searching for information that describes how plants, like the mangrove tree, interact with air. Students then share what they know about oxygen and carbon dioxide using the knowledge they've gained from the text. Using what students learned about plants and animals from the text, students set up an investigation and record their observations, predictions, data analysis, explanations, and claims in their science logbooks. So as you might have noticed, the 3 through 5 science logbook provides more opportunities for writing. You might notice a little more text on the page, and this is intentional. It's age appropriate. Our K through 2 students, like I said, there might be more opportunities for drawing pictures, labeling, picking the correct answer out of multiple choice questions. This is more explain your answer, construct a claim, and write your evidence. So the literacy tasks increase with complexity as students move throughout the grade bands. Students then refer back to the text to confirm their findings from the investigation. Throughout the module, students continuously revisit the text to provoke learning and verify their findings. Not only are students reading the book once and then doing some other activity, they're going back to the book, back and forth, to provoke new thinking and then to confirm their thoughts or their ideas. So it's a constant interaction with the text. Now we're going to look at a little more complex of a text. That was pretty easy for a 5th grader to read, more of a storybook. But now we're going to look at Living Sunlight, how plants bring the earth to life. So this is when students are continuing to learn about how plants interact with carbon dioxide and oxygen through this more complex text. So they're going to read various sections several times over, but maybe through a different lens each time. So here's where I want to pause and ask you, what reread strategies are you currently using with your students? If you're rereading text, maybe through a different lens, or I don't want to give away any answers or any ideas, what reread strategies are you using with your students? And if we don't get anything in, maybe we can go over a couple together.
Okay, we need to repeat the question. I think some folks missed it, but someone did say close reading strategies. So maybe that person can provide a little more clarity on what they mean by close reading, because I think that's spot on. But yeah, some folks need the question again, I think.
Sure. So what reread strategies are you currently using with your students? Students are asked in this module to reread this text. How do you do that in your classroom? And for whoever said close read, yeah, if you want to elaborate a little bit more, and we can talk more about that.
Okay, they reread with annotation prompts. That's a separate answer, not related to the close reading, but perhaps related.
Okay, great.
Reread strategies, with keywords, okay.
Okay, great. So those are great strategies. Some of the strategies that PhD Science uses, we like to say reading through a different lens, which could be looking for keywords or focus on annotating complex sentences or sentences that don't make sense or whatever it is. Maybe your students can partner read. They could also read for storylines, or they could read to answer specific questions. So things like that we should be thinking about, intentionally setting purpose before asking our students to go back and reread the text, this time giving them some sort of direction so they can hone in on something. But you guys answer that perfectly. So during students' first read, they're using the stop and jot instructional routine to record details about carbon dioxide and oxygen. As they go through, as something pops out at them about carbon dioxide or oxygen, they stop, they jot their ideas, they continue reading. And then using their notes, they share key details about plants' interactions with air and water. The class then rereads various sentences and reviews evidence from past investigations to clear up any misconceptions. And I believe they read this 3 times. So through the text, students are introduced to the key term photosynthesis, which is a key term in the module's glossary. So we use this ABC CBT method when introducing key terms. Only after being exposed to a concept such as photosynthesis through the core text do students learn the term associated with that concept. So they're reading about photosynthesis, then the book reveals the term. This process is called photosynthesis, and we refer to this method as, like I said, ABC CBT. It's a key feature embedded into the modules. ABC stands for activity before a concept, which just means that students are engaging in an activity to then generate ideas and understand the scientific concept being addressed. CBT stands for concept before terminology, which just means that after students are exposed to that concept, then the terminology is applied to that concept. So this process allows for better retention and deeper understanding of science concepts and terms. And as we were saying, in this module, students learn the term photosynthesis through models, class discussion, and the core text. All of these other terms are introduced in the same way, engaging in an activity, discussing the concept, and then assigning terminology to that concept. And if we have questions about that at the end of the session, I'm more than happy to answer any as best I can. But this is a pretty important process that PhD Science is really proud of, because we do think it makes a difference and it allows for deeper understanding for students. So after the term photosynthesis, students update their existing models and science logbooks. The class then rereads sections of the text a 3rd time while pausing after each step in the photosynthesis process. So this time they're reading with the lens of photosynthesis. Students then work in pairs to revise components of their initial models and describe each step of the process to their partners. So you can see again, students are going back and forth between the text and their science logbooks, updating their models, adding new information, and then confirming their findings with the text. The class then rereads the text again, but this time with a different lens. The class focuses on the role that energy has in forming new plant tissue. So before it was photosynthesis, and now it's energy. So just like in the K2 modules, levels 3 through 5 highlight content area connections embedded within the curriculum. So here you see another English language arts content area connection. This content area connection encourages students to craft sentence starters to compare and contrast two concepts. So I'll give you just a second to read that. So instead of providing students with those sentence starters, you're actually asking those 5th grade students, what could be a sentence starter? Why don't you think of something, a structure that could work? Just a little more push than those K2 students. PhD Science is designed to seamlessly integrate not only English language arts, but other connections to math, visual art, history, and more. So we're not just doing this for English, we're doing this for other content areas as well. Okay, and now we've reached our last minute reflection question, and that is, how do students benefit from the integration of ELA and science? knowing what we know now, or maybe you already knew it before, but having the information fresh in your mind, how would you answer this question on the screen? And then whenever you're ready, you can type your answer into the chat and we can talk about it.
Reading and science practices overlap. We need to be able to read to do science. It's more meaningful for students.
Definitely. Yep. You can't have science without ELA, and science makes ELA more fun. And that's an opinionated statement. But the integration of the two just enhance the two. Different subject areas don't have to be taught in isolation. You can integrate, mix and match, and spice it up. It keeps students on their toes and more engaged. And that is all we have for you today. So thank you guys for being here. I know we're all kind of sleepy and the week just feels like it's dragged on, but you being here really shows your dedication to successful implementation. So we thank you for that. And I think we'll have a little question and answer session right after this, if you want to stick around for a little bit.
Yeah, and we actually had a couple questions roll in as you presented. The first was related to those student cards. So I think they're referring to the knowledge deck cards. And they asked if they are consumable. And if so, do students take them home or do students return them at the end?
They are consumable. They're made to be taken home. The teacher poster is laminated. It's not consumable. But the knowledge deck cards, we have refill kits available for purchase. They're supposed to be for students to take them home. I like to say collect them like Pokemon cards, but it's for them to see their knowledge grows as their deck grows.
And then a lot of questions related to ABC, CBT. So activity before concept, concept before terminology. And someone's been trying to do ABC, so the activity before concepts, for a while, and they just sort of feel like maybe they're not doing it right because they feel like they're needing to do a little more leading to help the students make those deep connections. So how could they get their students to get there a bit more on their own, perhaps?
Okay, so the activity portion of ABC CBT is there so students can refer back in their minds to that investigation or that experiment and jog their memory for that term. So even if your activity is not going as planned or your investigation was wonky and you didn't get the results you needed, hopefully in your classroom, you're debriefing that investigation. If something went wrong, why did it go wrong? What happened? What results were we supposed to get? So whether or not your students are really truly getting those desired results, your students are still learning even from their mistakes. So debriefing and talking about what you learned from that activity is still going to jog their memory when you apply that term. So for example, we have a teacher who says, every time I ask them about a term, they forget it. And then all I have to say is, remember the shaving cream? And they're like, oh yeah, the shaving cream, now I know. So even if the shaving cream activity didn't go as planned, it's still jogging their memory about what that concept is and then what that term is. And that's the whole point of setting it up that way and having students learn that term after an activity and a concept rather than front loading it where that term really doesn't have a lot of meaning. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think it sparked another question actually, though, which is, do you suggest that prior knowledge be activated before or during the activity?
That's a great question. And I would say that's up to you. It's important that all students start on a level playing field, and the curriculum is written so that students don't have to have background knowledge or prior knowledge to understand these science concepts. But with that being said, it's important to allow your students to give that background knowledge if they have it. You want them to feel heard and like they're bringing something to the table. So whenever you want to bring that in, Johnny's been to a pond before. He has a pond in his neighborhood. Share out and tell us some stuff about the pond in your neighborhood. Or starting the activity or the lesson and then asking, Johnny, is this, have you ever seen this before in your pond? Or something like that. It's really up to you. But all I would say is it's important to acknowledge that prior knowledge from your students, even though it's not necessary for students to be successful.
Awesome. And then I think the final question we have so far related to activities is really, I almost feel like more about the reading element. So
Okay.
it's just a lot of struggle to fit science in. So, like, if they just used the books instead of doing the activities, do you think that students would still be able to master the scientific skills?
I can tell you that everything was crafted very intentionally, and one without the other would definitely not be as strong. So while the books are fun and engaging, the books without the content knowledge and all the other activities can't stand alone. So the books are something you can reread, like I said, in during your literacy block or carpet time or during dismissal, but they have to be used in conjunction with the other activities and prompts in the curriculum in order to be really effective.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. This one is related to English language learners. So someone here
Okay.
has quite a few English language learners in their classroom, and they know that you mentioned supports for them, but can you expand a bit on what those supports are?
Right. So if you're talking about English language learners from the lens of all of our K2 students, obviously the curriculum is crafted to support those students as they're learning the English language in general, very scaffolded for our younger students. If you're referring to ESL students, there are supports, just how we saw those English language arts content area connections, that's a mouthful, just in time notes in the margins. We also have English language development supports, and some of those include tips like provide the cognate for the word and work backwards. So students have an idea of what that word is, and then can transfer their ideology and articulate it in English. And we have Spanish cognates listed out in the glossary, and also just those little Easter eggs all throughout the curriculum to help those students who are not speaking English as their first language.
Right, thank you for that. And then this one, and I mean, we've had quite a few thanks actually roll in, but this one's a very specific thanks. So they were really glad to see those other connections made at the end of the presentation, and wondering if you have any specific advice for incorporating science into their math block, since we've talked about it within the literacy block.
Okay, incorporating science into your math block. I would say more incorporating math into your science block. So there's lots of opportunities for math, and one of our science and engineering practices is mathematics and computational thinking. So it's embedded into the curriculum as is, and lots of opportunity for looking at graphs and charts and doing, I'm saying math, addition and subtraction, so I'm not a math major, but it's embedded into the curriculum itself. As far as transferring some of that science into your math instruction, it wouldn't be as easy. It's easier to bring math into science than it is to take those really complex and layered phenomena and apply it to your whatever it is students are doing in math. Does that make sense?
I believe so. If we have any questions around clarification there, I'll let you know. But I think that's all I'm seeing right now in terms of questions. So thank you so very much, Sally. Great presentation. Yeah. I learned a lot. I'm sure our attendees did as well. And thank you to our attendees for joining. We hope that you found this to be a meaningful experience. As you leave, there will be a brief survey that launches. We truly read all of that feedback and take it to allow us to better serve you in future webinars. If you do have further questions after today's webinar, you're welcome to jot that into the survey as well. We'd be thrilled to connect with you further, whether it's on social media or if you're ready to connect with sales. You can also reach out to us more directly and get connected that way. Additionally, we do have one final webinar upcoming next week in our spring series, and that will be followed up by a pilot webinar. We would be delighted to see you on any of our future webinars, and if you can't make it live, you can still go ahead and register anyway, so that you may receive the recordings just as this webinar was recorded this afternoon. And finally, just a quick reminder about that survey that will launch as you exit. So thank you again for joining, and we hope to see you soon.